So raise your hand if you've heard of ninjas. Cool. So what are some of your stereotypes of ninjas? Like, what have you heard about them?
They have special powers,
Okay, what kind of special powers?
like magical ones.
Sneaky as fuck.
Yeah.
They were black.
Okay. What else?
Good at jumping.
Okay, yeah.
Sneaky.
Uh-huh. Okay, so a little quiz for you. Which one of these is a ninja?
All.
3.
All ninjas.
One on the left.
Yeah, possibly all of them except probably the one on the left, which never really existed, probably. If you think about it, it's kind of like asking, oh, like, what outfit does a CIA agent wear? And it's like, probably whatever he's pretending to be. So historically, ninja did mostly disguise themselves as people who had an excuse to be traveling around. So it could be like wandering monks, merchants. Often they were just samurai. And if you had like a really well-educated ninja, then a geisha was like a very good disguise because they had close access to a lot of people. So if you've ever seen traditional theater, like that's where the ninja costume idea kind of came from. These are stagehands from The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, a TV show. You can barely see them because they're in the background here. This is in kabuki theater. So by theater convention, these people wearing black were like invisible. And then when theater tropes would kind of like incorporate ninja, then they would do this thing where the ninja were kind of like hidden in with the stagehands, and it's like, oh, the ninja's invisible, so he can like appear places. So that's kind of where that whole trope of the costume comes from. But if you think about it, it's not super practical if you're going to like infiltrate a castle to be dressed really conspicuously all in black, because even if that's like a good way to like stealthily approach the castle and climb the walls and get inside, like what are you actually gonna do once you're inside the castle and you're dressed like that? Like walking through the hallways trying to find this guy that you're gonna assassinate, and then people see you and it's like, oh, like what's up with this guy over here? So this is the oldest known illustration of a ninja. And as you can see, pretty much they look like dudes. Like normal Japanese dudes. So a really important thing to know about ninja is that they were not really distinct from the samurai, except that they were like samurai who had more skills around intelligence gathering and strategy, and they might have more training and kind of like a higher level of technique. But it's not super accurate to say that ninja were like a distinct class of people outside of the samurai. Okay, so do you think that ninja used weapons like this?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Necessary.
Yeah, if you look closely, there's one in this picture. Pretty much any weapon that a samurai would use, a ninja would also use. You guys think that ninja use these kind of things?
Yeah.
Wait.
According to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, yes.
Yeah, this one's kind of funny because on the left side, probably not. Those were Okinawan Sai, and it was like a distinct fighting culture. But on the right, you have jute, which were kind of like police batons used for taking people's swords away and also for bashing them. And ninjas definitely did use those. Okay, and then how about these things?
Yes.
What they're called, ninja stars, right?
Yeah, so ironically, the
Naruto.
star design was probably not used very much. That design is actually quite hard to travel with and use. if you think about like how you would kind of put that in your clothing or like where you would carry that, it's quite difficult. However, this design was used quite widely, so you can pass these around.
As a thrown object?
Yes, as a thrown object. The use of shuriken was not, well, again, the lines between samurai and ninja were quite blurry. Quite a few samurai schools had this technique where within, kind of like along the scabbard of their sword, they would have a little compartment where they would keep one of these bow shuriken. And then as they were going to draw their sword, they might actually first throw a shuriken, and then in the moment that they're distracted, like pull and slice. So it was kind of a very short range distraction device. You would probably not really try to kill someone with something like that. It'd be pretty difficult too.
So what's the objective of throwing that? A distraction?
Yeah, it's mostly to kind of create this moment of surprise that can be exploited.
Could you inflict damage with that thing?
You could, yeah. You pretty much need to hit like a really vulnerable spot like the eyes to cause a serious injury. But you could definitely pierce skin with that and cause bleeding, but it's not gonna like stop someone who's trying to kill you.
Did normal samurai use that stuff as well?
In some schools, yeah.
That's mostly a ninja thing.
It's mostly considered a ninja thing, but again, these lines are very blurry. Yeah. So I'll tell you guys a really crazy story of kind of the best known ninja assassination. So I think when people imagine a ninja assassination, they like imagine the guy clad in black scaling the castle walls, like sneaking through the hallways at night and like finding some guy to stab him. And the way this really worked is that in one case, Usagi Kenshin was assassinated, and the way that he was assassinated is that someone joined his kitchen staff after kind of like hanging around the village near the castle. And he works in the kitchen staff for 6 months, and while he's in the kitchen staff, what he's doing is he's trying to like map out the castle layout. So he's delivering meals, he's trying to observe where all the corridors are, observe where all the infrastructure is, and then finally one day when he's like pretty sure he knows where everything is, he disappears from the kitchen duty and he climbs up this latrine shaft. So basically, this is like the old days where you pooped and it fell down like a long column. So he's climbing up, like doing a chimney climb, and then he's waiting underneath the Lord's toilet for the Lord to come and do his morning shit, and then he stabs him through the toilet and then runs away. So it's not very glamorous work, really. Okay, so did ninja use leads?
No.
Yeah. Actually, they did use these a lot. It was one of their specialties. A lot of samurai were using guns ever since the Portuguese introduced them in the 1500s. The ninja were especially fond of adopting new technology, including new weaponry, and they had quite a lot of tactics around using guns.
So, do you know what was like the general ninja period of Japan?
Yeah, ninja were very active during the Sengoku Jidai, which was from 1480 until 1570, and then after Tokugawa Ieyasu kind of consolidated power, they became subsumed into his rule. So for the next 250 years, the ninja were in the background of the Japanese peacetime. Okay, so something I want to talk about is threat models and how you can basically look at a martial art and evaluate what its training goals are by its threat model. This is like a way of deciding what you think a martial art is capable of, how they state their own goals. So, who's got a martial art that I know that you've heard? Krav Maga. Okay. So, what do you think the threat model of Krav Maga is? Like, what is the thing that they say they're training for?
You in close combat, in
Mhm.
close proximity, you've been exposed to fists or knife or gun, and you want to like get away or like disable and or get away as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Krav Maga is one of the schools that's closest to Ninjutsu in terms of its training goal and threat model. So, some other martial art people know. Capoeira. Okay. And what do you think the threat model of capoeira is?
Like a trickstery, fool them and then kick them from range.
Yeah. So generally, capoeira models the people that you'll be fighting as unarmed, or maybe they'll have a short stick. And then, what about for something like jiu-jitsu? Or Brazilian jiu-jitsu specifically?
It's more like grappling on the floor, right?
Yeah, so their threat model might be someone's attacking you, it's usually one person, and for some reason they don't want to punch you. I mean, so one thing that is really important to say is I think that every martial arts threat model is valid in a certain context. Like with jiu-jitsu, you might be in a situation where your uncle's drunk and you don't really want to hurt him, but he's being violent, so you're trying to like subdue him. There are like definitely always situations where a given martial arts threat model is very relevant. However, sometimes I do visit schools and I'm like, this is such a specific threat model that it feels very limiting. Like last Tuesday, I went to this Japanese sword school and they practice something called Toyama Ryu, and the Toyama Ryu threat model is specifically that you are being attacked by someone with a sword and you also have a sword and you both know that you're fighting each other and you're both not wearing armor. So it's like a duel between two katana wielders. And all of their training is for that specific situation. And you might wonder how that's relevant to modern life. I would say it's probably not very relevant. Okay. So a lot of people think about things like MMA and UFC as being like this really great proving ground for what are legitimate martial arts because you're really putting things to the test and it's kind of this very focused arena. And that's true to an extent, but they do have an implicit threat model also. And this is kind of the thing. I considered also titling this slide a list of really good ideas if you're in a dangerous situation. So in fact, assuming that your opponent is not going to do any of these things in a real situation is really dangerous. There's lots of ways in which people learn not to protect themselves because they're assuming that people are following the same rules, and that becomes a really strong liability in kind of like a combat situation. Who's ever seen one of these things happen in a real fight?
All of us.
It actually takes a lot of training to not do these things by accident. Like you could be trying to kick someone not in their groin and still kick them in the groin, and then that could get you disqualified from your fight. So there's like a whole portion of MMA fighters' brain that's like inhibiting them from kind of instinctually protecting themselves. Okay. So one reason I really like Ninjutsu is that its threat model and its kind of like training goal is really, really, really difficult, and it's kind of framed as something that would take you multiple decades to be able to do. But because it sets its sights really, really high, it kind of creates this very rigorous training, and it doesn't create a lot of limitations in your movement. So the goal of Ninjutsu is to kind of arrive at this combat capability where you could be facing someone who has a weapon and is trained in using that weapon, and you're unarmed, and you're able to disarm that person and subdue them, and hopefully not get too injured. So that's a really, really difficult thing to do. The more that you practice with weapons, the more you realize that it's just really easy to kill people with weapons. And to not get killed by someone who knows how to use a weapon is just like an insane level of difficulty. Okay, so something really interesting happened to Japanese martial arts during the Meiji era, which was a 250-year time of peace, which is that martial arts basically lost their edge. People weren't using them to survive anymore because there wasn't very much warfare. It was a very peaceful time, and a lot of samurai basically learned to adapt their martial art for a wider audience. A lot of merchants at that time became interested in learning martial arts, kind of like broadened out. And then after the Meiji era, things got even bigger in a sense and more watered down. You had people who founded Judo, who kind of created this mass education model of martial arts. So Judo came from Jiu-Jitsu, which had a lot of dangerous techniques, but a lot of the dangerous techniques were purposely removed in order to create something where people could safely practice it without a lot of sealed instructions. So you could pretty much throw people, and they were throwing you in a way where you had a way to roll out of it. In kind of more traditional, authentic Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which was the predecessor to Judo, you would throw people in a way where they don't have a way to roll. Like, you would be throwing people specifically so that they land on their neck in a way that would kill them. That's the kind of thing that existed before the creation of martial arts that were more like sports, more created for physical education than for combative training. So you might wonder, like, what is the reason to still practice these really archaic martial arts that are less safe to train, that are harder to do because they're not created for mass education? Like, why bother? So I would argue that one big reason is because these traditions preserve an ancestral movement, a way of using our bodies before we were kind of shaped by the modern era. Movement that comes from a time when we really still had to use our bodies in order to survive, and before our posture was kind of like distorted by chairs and desks and all of these like modern things like phones that are just causing us to like really turn into like tricks basically. So one of the biggest predictors of how well you're gonna live in your old age is your ability to like stand up and sit down. And Japanese culture has been better than most cultures at preserving a culture of sitting on the floor, but even in Japan, you'll notice a lot of people have kind of lost this ability as the style of homes in Japan has become more westernized. I found that there are a lot of health benefits from practicing a more ancestral movement because it teaches a different relationship to the spine and to the legs and to the hips that is just kind of missing in modernity. Pause here for questions. Yeah.
I have a question for the last one. When they're training martial arts beforehand, they're training to throw someone on the head and break their neck.
Yeah.
How do they practice that?
Yeah. So it's all a question of degrees. So depending on how well you know your training partners in Kemi, you can perform progressively more dangerous versions of it. So a lot of these throws have been modified in a way, and you can kind of reverse engineer the modification and go towards some more dangerous version again, and then still try to leave them enough room that they can escape it. But as long as you know what that vector is towards the more dangerous version, then you have the possibility to do the dangerous version if you need to. And it's about learning to control that spectrum of like, I'm deliberately doing something that's very easy for someone to roll out of elegantly. A lot of Aikido movement looks like this. If you see the way Aikido people throw themselves, like they're all rolling so beautifully because the technique is almost created so that someone can roll really nicely out of it. And then you can create sharper and sharper versions of it where instead of like throwing them with this kind of smooth momentum where it's like a smooth arc, you kind of like jerk the movement. So there's a big thing about learning to generate jerk, which is the second derivative of acceleration. So acceleration is what gravity does, right? So if you learn how to go from not dropping to dropping in an instant, then you generate a jerk. So this is basically like learning how to fall in an instant. And if you can fall in an instant, then you can generate this jerking motion. And if you throw someone with a jerk, then it's like very difficult.
Can you speak more to what's on here?
Yeah. Did you know that British people even sat on the floor before coal heating? So in the old days when we heated homes using wood, wood smoke would rise and it would kind of like hang around a few feet above the ground. So everyone actually wanted to be lower than the smoke. But then Britain found a lot of coal. So this is kind of the start of the Industrial Revolution, and they started doing a lot of coal heating. Coal smoke is very heavy, so it actually hangs around down here. And so everyone wanted to be elevated off of the ground up here so that the coal smoke is down there. So that's kind of how a lot of movement culture started to change. It's tied in with the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, anything else on this topic?
I'm curious about the ability to sit and stand.
Yeah.
How
Hmm.
sit, is it the how we sit and stand, or is it the frequency, or
Yeah, so I mean, one of the reasons why old people need to get into assisted living situations is because they like fall over and they can't get up. So yeah, it's basically like your ability to get back up off the ground is like the marker for your ability to function as an independent person. And as soon as someone loses that ability, their life expectancy decreases drastically. Yeah.
what?
Because they can't live independently anymore, I guess.
It's not a matter of being still in the sitting or still in the stand. That's what I initially thought.
Oh.
Like it's the ability of recovering from the fall or the sit. Or the,
Yeah, yeah.
I think one of the greatest risks is falling and breaking your hip as well.
Yeah. Okay, so something that I really love about ninjutsu is it's just, there's an insane amount to learn. Within the tradition that I practice, there are 9 distinct lineages that all have a slightly different style but build on the same kind of basis. And there's more than a dozen different weapons. So to even cover all of the material could conceivably take like your whole life. And I think this is really cool because one way that I conceive of the goal of the practice is that you're trying to build a generative model that can adapt to like a huge variety of situations and basically get to the point where you can take any unfamiliar object in hand and figure out how to use it as a weapon. Kind of like what Jackie Chan's able to do in his movies where he's using a ladder as a weapon and you're like, that's crazy. And having this huge variety is also kind of helping your mind like distill down the essences of what parts of the movement are shared across all of this training. And I think it creates this really, really solid foundation of movement that's widely applicable. Yeah.
Do you study like the specific, you said dozen weapons, or
Mhm.
do you picture like, oh, how can I make the shoe a weapon, or is there like principles around that?
Yeah, so there are about a dozen weapons that we do practice formally, and the really interesting thing is that the way that we use a sword, so a lot of people think of this as primarily a cutting weapon, but historically the way that most people were killed with a sword was by getting stabbed. And the way that we lunge in order to attack someone with a sword is the same way that if I had a spear, I would lunge to attack with the spear. It just kind of changes the distances involved. And so there's this way in which you learn this one foundational way of leg work that then applies to all weaponry. So, and there's some principles that are always involved, like you're pretty much putting the weapon between you and the other person, and you're trying to hide as much of your body behind the weapon as possible. So a lot of times people end up doing this, and you don't want to turn your torso forward like this, you want to stay behind.
So that applies to all weapons.
That pretty much applies to all weapon combat, yeah. And you can even see that across historical European martial arts, just as a general principle. Yeah, one thing I really enjoy about historical martial arts training is that it really shows how form follows function, in that you look at all of these European martial arts manuals and you see the same body shapes, and it's because the logic of using weapons on the battlefield just dictates movement.
Do you ever consciously train or practice with non-weapon objects?
A little bit, yeah. I have some party favors for everyone after this talk.
Weapon.
Yeah.
So, it's making me think of fencing
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and samurai
Mm-hmm.
fighting.
Yep.
I took a dive into the Book of Five Rings.
Cool, yeah.
And so what comes up when I bring up those two? They're a bit tangential, maybe different times, but yeah.
Yeah, fencing shares a lot of the same principles. As fencing became a sport, it became a little bit faster paced, and people are maybe a little bit more athletic in the way that they use their legs. Something that we have as a movement pattern that is almost not seen at all in modern day is we have this thing where all my weight's loaded on this back leg, but I can still move on it, and there's this way of like sliding on a weighted foot, and you don't really see that in modern athletic movement. These days most people will like kind of push off of their feet, and they're on the balls of their feet a lot, and that's kind of like a athletic way of moving. But we learned this way of sliding, which is very underrepresented in modern contexts.
Why would you lean towards one or the other?
So the sliding way of moving harnesses gravity, so it's actually a form of movement that's done through relaxation rather than through generating force. So if I'm sliding this way, that sliding movement was actually done through a relaxation of structures in my leg and letting gravity pull my body forward. Versus if I didn't know how to do that, I'd have to like shift my weight this way in order to push off of that leg, and it becomes multiple movements. Whereas here, it's just a single movement to slide, and there's no weight shifting. And the lack of weight shifting lets you do things like slide and then kick.
So then why would fencers or other people do the athletic version of it?
Because they're very concerned with like speed, and you don't die when you double hit, so that's like more doable. You're also not wearing as much armor, so if you had like 20 kilograms of armor on, then your calves are gonna get super tired if you're trying to like bounce around in that. Those are some considerations. Yeah, this form of movement where you're letting gravity move you is also very efficient. Like, it doesn't tire you out very quickly, so it gives you kind of like sustained endurance. Okay, and then one question you might have is like, if you're literally practicing attacking each other with weapons, and basically like, how do you do that training safely? And a lot of the answer is just to slow movements down, and if you do it really slowly, you have enough time to kind of like do the motions correctly without freaking out, and you get to practice. And you might wonder like, oh, is that very realistic? Because if everything is being done super slowly, like, will you be able to do things at speed when it's important to? And I basically found that the answer is yes, because if you train the correct movements slowly, it still creates the right myelination in your brain that is then able to perform at high speed. And in this book, The Talent Code, I read this really interesting thing about how the Meadowmount Music School teaches cellists and violinists. So this is a really famous music training academy where like Yo-Yo Ma and Isak Perlman and a lot of people went. They basically have this thing when you're learning a new piece of music. They're like, if anyone can tell what piece of music you're playing when they like overhear your practice, you're not playing it slowly enough. And they'll literally like spend like 20 minutes playing like maybe just a small passage of like just a really small passage of music, playing it extremely slowly. That's a really huge part of their practice, and I found that's quite effective for learning how to perform movement that you will apply at speed in the future safely. Yeah.
I'm curious about the healing arts and what you come across in your history analysis.
Yeah. So my teacher is a massage therapist, and he kind of used that as a way to synergize with his practice, because he was constantly getting bodies to experiment on and learning how to apply pressure points and different things. Our practice does have an emphasis on precision, so there are points of the body that are beneficial to strike, and I remember in the first 2 years of training, there was this one time that I was attacking my teacher with a wooden knife, and he struck me in the brachial plexus, which is right here, and I felt this like jolt of nerve pain go down my whole arm, and my hand involuntarily released the knife, and I couldn't like close my fist for like a minute. So it was really cool stuff. What I've discovered is that a lot of the practice is actually on the receiving side. So you're always paired up with people doing techniques, and it's just as important to be stretched out as it is to stretch someone out. So when I'm receiving wrist locks, like someone might be like bending me over like this, and you gain a huge range of flexibility by being stretched by your training partner, as long as you're kind of like trusting the process with each other. Yeah.
Could I have modified that?
Yeah, please.
Historically, what have you found? Like first aid applies?
Yeah. Historically, some of these lineages actually did have systems of healing that went alongside them. Several historical lineages would kind of package kind of like school of massage along with it, or acupuncture was also very common. It was basically like if you were a professional warrior, you expected that you would get beat up a lot, and probably be helpful if your students knew how to like give you a massage. Okay. So it's kind of a weird question, but one that's very relevant to my interests, which is basically like, can ninjutsu serve as a spiritual path? Can it lead to sort of awakening? And the reason I even found out about ninjutsu was from this very odd book called Path Notes of an American Ninja Master, and he's basically making the argument that ninjutsu is a full-blown spiritual path, and that he's met people who were like awakened through their practice. So I think there's a bunch of ways in which ninjutsu can be very beneficial to anyone who's trying to cultivate a spiritual practice, meditation practice. One is that it makes you really aware of frame dropping, which is basically like, when I first started training, if someone like punched me, it looked to me as if first their fist was here, and then all of a sudden their fist was here, and it's like their punch was just like teleporting towards my face. And then as I got more training, it was like, oh, it's like it's like I started to see more of the in-between frames of like where the fist was coming. And over time, it's like, oh, I really shouldn't like blink when someone punches me, because in that blink, that's like 3 frames. So I think one really cool thing about martial arts is it can be an arena for you to test your kind of like awareness per second. And I think there is still a lot of predictive processing. I don't think that martial artists necessarily can like perceive faster than like 24 frames per second, or like that seems to be a pretty natural human limit, but there is a way in which our nervous systems get kind of trained to freak out less, and to be more accurate in the ways that we're predicting things. So one thing that commonly happens in the beginning of training is if someone kind of like stabs like that, it almost like sends this like danger shockwave in front of the weapon. So as a weapon's approaching me, it's like, even when it's still a few feet away, I'm like feeling that danger, and I'll kind of like flinch. And one of the things that we're learning in the Mutodori training is that we actually need to not react too early, because if we do, it'll cause them to just change what they're doing. And the most reliable way of kind of dealing with someone who's attacking is you need to kind of like stay with the attack and then move at the last moment. So in order to do that, you have to kind of gain this comfort where the danger wavefront gets closer and closer to where the actual weapon is. So I think one reason why the danger wavefront can be really big is if you're actually kind of like reacting to things at like 8 frames per second, then it's like you need 3 frames of safety buffer in order for your body to feel kind of like safe that the weapon's not just gonna hit you. So 3 frames of safety buffer might be like really big. And then so you're reacting to things like while the sword's still a foot away. And the goal is to get to the point where like you're waiting until literally the moment the sword's about to graze you to move. And to do that, you need to like get this wavefront to be quite small. Okay, another way that I feel like ninjutsu can be very helpful for people who are trying to gain consciousness is that our training is ambidextrous. That's quite a unique feature in our schools. So most schools, if you ask them to do anything with their left hand, they just won't be able to do it. But for me, it's like, it's equally as easy to do any movement with my left hand, because that's something that we really consciously practice in our curriculum. Like every movement that we do is done on both hands. Most sword schools you go to, they will only practice the right side. And I'll even like leave their classes feeling bad in my body because it's like so weird to like only use one side of my body. Yeah.
Don't people naturally gravitate towards that side anyways? Like, or are you consciously choosing, oh, I've stroked with my right versus my left, now I have to switch? I train Jiu-Jitsu and I see this a lot where like people always like pull guard on the same side,
Right.
or and don't do it on the other side.
Yeah, so like hand dominance is a really interesting thing. It does seem to be somewhat inborn. I think if you do a lot of ambidextrous training, you'll eventually start to notice this weird thing, which is that by default, it's like we kind of have like a grabbing hand, and for most people, their dominant hand is the grabbing hand, and like for most people, if that sword is there, they're gonna like reach across their body to grab it because this is just like so strongly the grabbing hand. But like I would probably just do this. But there's like a period of years where I would notice just all these clumsy movements I would do where it's like I could just grab something with my left hand like this, but instead I would be like turning to grab it, and it's like why? Something that is really interesting to notice is doing techniques with the left and right hands. Like the hands often have very different personalities. Like my left hand is a lot better at techniques that have kind of like a gentle control to them, and my left hand doesn't have as much tendency to just like try to grab onto people. So my right hand is more like control-y or graspy, and I'm trying to like teach my right hand to be more like my left hand, because actually the left-handed tendency is more useful at a high level of martial arts. So one way that you could all practice some ambidexterity that's really low stakes and easy to incorporate into your daily routine is you can just try brushing your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed. And you'll immediately notice how like clumsy and weird that feels. But I will say that after 2 years of practice, now it feels as natural to brush with my left hand as with my right. So that's been super fun. Okay, so another thing that martial arts is really good for is creating expanded awareness. This is especially true in martial arts where maybe there's an awareness that you could be attacked by multiple people, so you can't just collapse your awareness into like one person. I found that Hojo Jutsu, which is the practice of rope tying, kind of like a ancient martial predecessor to Shibari. Shibari is really sanitized these days because you do all these complicated double column ties in order to not constrict someone's blood vessels. In Hojo Jutsu, you would kind of do the simplest knots possible because you don't really care if they lose circulation. But what I found with Hojo Jutsu is if you're trying to tie someone up, it's really important that you don't collapse your awareness into like tying a knot, because if you do that, you're gonna lose sight of everything that they're trying to do to resist you, and also with how the entire rope is interacting with your body. So there's this way that if you're trying to control someone with a rope, you have to remain in this expanded awareness of their entire body, the whole rope, and how your body is interacting with the like rope person system. And ideally, you're also maintaining awareness of your context in case someone else is trying to come and stop you from tying that person. I've also found that carrying around a staff, like a 6-foot staff, is really good practice for spatial awareness. So there was a period where I was commuting a lot with this big weapons bag that held a 6-foot staff in it, and as you're like carrying that through the subway, and it's really tight with people, like you just become very good with rotating this specific shape. And I found that pretty fun during COVID, where I felt like I just had an innate awareness of like a 6-foot distance basically, because it's like, okay, this is where if I reached out with the staff, like I could hit someone. It's a little bit longer than 6 feet. Okay, and then something that you can try if you've gotten used to brushing your teeth with your left hand in the bathroom, you could also try blow drying with one hand and brushing your teeth with the other hand. What I've noticed about this exercise is it's really easy to collapse your awareness into one hand or the other. Like, you'll notice that, oh, you're like blow drying really well, but you're not actually brushing your teeth very well anymore. Or you're brushing your teeth, but your scalp's getting hot because you kind of like stopped blow drying. So it's actually quite difficult to like coordinate both movements and keep your awareness expanded in both hands. Any questions here?
Are there other ways that you train unexpanded awareness specifically?
I mean, specifically meditating on, one meditation you can do is you can kind of like listen to your breathing and then try to like make your breathing as quiet as possible, and then you're almost like listening to the sound of silence. And then once you're in that state where it's very like calm, then you try to listen for what are the furthest away sounds that you can hear, and try to contain like a really large aural field in your awareness. Yeah.
On a similar note, what has Ninjutsu said about meditation?
Yeah. Historically, Ninjutsu was closely associated with Nikkyo Buddhism, which is the kind of like esoteric Vajrayana transmissions of Buddhism in Japan. So, yeah, I will say one thing that's very different about the ninja attitude is that ninjas prioritize life. I think, yeah, one thing that distinguished the ninjas philosophically in a historical context is that a lot of samurai had this kind of like honor is the most important thing, and they would like kill themselves if they were dishonored. And the ninja were way more like the people like, oh, we're defeated in battle, like we'll go like hide for a while and then we'll come back later. They weren't like, oh, my life is ruined now, like, ah, like. And I think that goes along with the kind of Vajrayana perspective on life, which is that it's worth living, and yeah, it's like life isn't something to be transcended by some other value. Yep.
There's just one nuance on what you said, the shockwave and not reacting.
Yeah.
Essentially our reaction training that. But is there a sense of prediction with that? Of predicting where, like, opening up the awareness to be able to predict what the opponent might do before they're even going to do it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. I wonder if you can share what comes up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There is this concept of different timings, and you probably saw this in the Book of Five Rings if you were reading that. It's like this idea of sen no sen, which is basically like attacking as soon as you see that your opponent has the intention to attack. So this is like getting into being really finely aware of your opponent's movement and trying to understand like any tells that he might have, any peremptory movements. So some things that we do in our training is that we practice attacking without making any facial expressions, because a lot of people, when they like go to punch you, they'll first have a moment of like, they'll kind of like have to prepare themselves to inflict violence, and you can see that on their face where they kind of like grimace as they're about to attack. That's one thing. Depending on the martial arts style too, like some attacks have wind-ups that you can see. So yeah, there is like this level of prediction. At the higher levels, like some of this stuff I haven't really witnessed myself yet or like perceived, but supposedly you can almost like energetically sense someone's intention to attack you, and to receive the 5th degree black belt in this art, you have to take this test, which is called the Saki test, which is basically the killing intention test. So in this test, you are sitting like this, blindfolded, and a master is behind you, and he's basically gonna cut you with a bokken, and you have to basically like sense the right timing to roll out of the way. And so I haven't done the test. I don't know if it's just that you can kind of like hear the sword coming, or what people say is that like they just get this like sense that like, oh shit, something bad's about to happen, and like it's like that feeling you get where your whole like spine kind of like gets the shivers, and you're just like, oh shit, and then like, so that's what I've heard from my friends who've done it. Yeah.
Maybe you'll get to this, but which of these skills or what parts of Ninjutsu kind of carry more into your life, or what have you kind of got the most from? Skills or anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even talk about the character Nin in Ninjutsu. The character in Chinese is basically a big knife over a heart, and the meaning is kind of perseverance, but it's kind of like, how do you act when your heart is literally like on the line? Like, what do you do when confronted with a sword? And I think that the high challenge level and kind of like the exactitude of the training has been really good for me, because it basically makes every other aspect of my life seem easy by comparison. Like, some of this training is so difficult that I go to work and I'm like, oh, this is like a really great break from my training. Like, it's so easy. I think that's probably the most important aspect. And then in terms of like practicality, I was able to intervene in an altercation and kind of like calm it down, and nobody got injured. I have been accosted on the street before, and I was able to just kind of like stare the guy down, and then he left me and my partner alone. These are just some things. I think that martial arts training in general, it's like you don't really end up getting into fights if you're doing it well, because a lot of fights are really posturing, and then if you're just someone who clearly has a dangerous posture, it kind of makes people not even want to engage with you and like start these situations. And there's just like a level of confidence. James, maybe I could borrow you for a demonstration. So I think this kind of thing where people like get in their faces, it's actually really stupid to get into situations like that, because even this distance is really dangerous from a martial arts perspective, because I'm already like in range of hitting James's throat. So, and like even this range for someone with a knife, like this is already dangerous. So to get up in someone's face like this is like pretty stupid, but I don't feel that uncomfortable because I know that I can do this. And it's basically a single movement where by turning my body, I'm protecting all of this stuff, and I have a direct line to like his stuff. All right. Anything else I can tell you guys?
Is the kanji, the nin, it's only for ninjutsu, or is it in ninja, or?
In Chinese, it's used pretty widely for just lots of situations, like where you're kind of like persevering with something, or like it has to do with patience.
What's the, is it the same pronunciation in Chinese?
In Chinese, it's ren.
Okay.
Does the patience translate into the training or even postures and stuff like this? Is that a common theme, or how does that show up?
I think it's a part of the training, one thing I've noticed about training is that I've actually had a lot of my training breakthroughs when I was training while very fatigued, because part of the art is like learning to move with less effort. And when I'm just like completely sleep deprived after a long flight and I go to class the next day anyway, I'm so tired that it's like I can't really like exert a lot of force anyway. And then I noticed that actually a lot of techniques are working better because I'm learning how to harness gravity more effectively and like use structure. Another cool thing about practice is I feel like it creates these inner structures, or rather you kind of like discover these inner structures and learn how to reinforce them. I think in a lot of ways the Western view of anatomy is very limiting. I feel like Western science tends to quote unquote like carve reality by the joints, but I would say the Eastern perspective is almost to like carve reality by its functions. And if you were to take like a martial arts perspective on the body, it's kind of like you have these like lines of force that spiral through the body, and you start to learn how to like feel where those structures are and how you can transmit force through these kind of like hidden inner structures. And some people conceptualize that as like developing like ki or the energy body. I think it has a lot to do with like fascia and kind of how your body is organized.
Sounds similar to strength training. I'm doing it myself or teaching a lot of people. I'm doing this kind of like word music movement.
Yeah.
I think I've seen stuff about martial arts stuff where it's like really stabilizing the whole body just by rotate or position.
Yeah. Definitely.
Do you feel you walk around day-to-day life with a general sense of guardedness? Or is it part of the practice, right, to maintain the open awareness but the still, with some like Tai Chi and some always start with that and relaxing the body. I wonder how all of this influences your day-to-day.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's this saying that if you're practicing martial arts, you should make your everyday walk your warrior's walk. So there's this aspect of integration into life. For me, my journey was that I started out my martial arts practice being someone who was very insecure in my body and like kind of afraid of life. So for me, I think initially there was this kind of like almost heightened paranoia of like, oh, now I'm walking around and I have even more awareness of like how it's dangerous to exist. But what I found is that over time, as I gained my own confidence, that kind of like melted away into like, okay, I have this awareness, but I'm not really very, like I feel very safe these days. Because I pretty much feel like, okay, even if someone were to try to stab me suddenly, like I have some instincts now where I feel like they're not gonna kill me immediately, and then like my training will kick in, and yeah, there's just not really like much cause for concern anymore.
Are there any other principles that differ from other schools of martial arts that seem useful or distinct or important?
Yeah. A lot of the ninjutsu lineages have a big influence from Kage-ryu, which is the shadow lineage. And so Aikido has this kind of beautiful image of like you're joining your energy with the opponent's energy and you're like making this harmonious blend of energy. And the ninja version of that is just has a little bit of different imagery to it. It's kind of like that you're becoming your opponent's shadow. So you want to become so attuned to the other person that as they move, you're moving, and it's like every movement that they're doing is mirrored by you in this like kind of shadowy way where you almost disappear into their movement. So that's one concept. A lot of concepts around like becoming like water are just shared across all of Japanese martial arts. In fact, the word for like a martial arts transmission, ryu, is the same word that's used to describe like a stream or like a flow of water. So the transmission of martial art from person to person was like seen as being this flow of movement through people.
Are there any weaknesses to this form of martial arts that you think are important to compensate for, or that you keep mind of?
Yeah, I think if you meet a lot of older practitioners of this art, like a lot of them are actually kind of overweight. I think that if you practice a form of movement that's very efficient, it's good to supplement that with some practices that are deliberately inefficient, like literally lifting weights or things like that, because I think these guys just got so used to like moving around in a way where they're not using a lot of energy, but they were still eating like they were like young guys, and they just got fat. It's like
Is there like an ideal body type for, I know you were talking before about like how different martial arts lend themselves to certain techniques, but
Yeah.
is there like an ideal like body form or type that would give you like momentum leverage or like any other types of leverage like spatially? Like how do you move?
So I don't love this trope in the martial arts where they try to claim that like a martial art will make it so that size is less important, or that you can like overcome larger opponents. I mean, in Jiu-Jitsu, there's kind of this idea that being one belt higher is kind of worth like being 20 pounds heavier. So approximately, if you were like a one belt level higher, you could beat someone who was 20 pounds heavier than you. One thing I will say is that weapons are like the great equalizer. Like two people, if you give a really small person a gun, it's like, that does a lot. So in this art and in pretty much any art, like there are considerations of like, if someone has a longer reach, like that's gonna be an advantage in a lot of situations. But if you have a longer weapon, like a spear, and then you're fighting someone with a sword, then you're kind of enhancing your own reach through the implement. I would say that this art advantages people who are flexible. So that's something I would look for in people who are looking to train. And then this is less of a body characteristic, but more of a mental characteristic. Like people who have good spatial temporal reasoning and can pick things up have a big advantage. There's just a lot of complication in what we do. Yeah.
Is there any notion of like contemporary ninjutsu in the sense that it's still evolving and being influenced by other like modern movement traditions, or is what you're doing much more like traditional?
Yeah, I love that question. Historically, like ninjutsu had a big emphasis on adaptability and kind of like changing with the times, and that's something that modern practitioners are attempting to carry forward. Like, I haven't done as much of this training myself because we live in New York State, which is very strict gun control, but some of my really good friends have well-developed curriculum around like how you incorporate handguns, rifles into this training, and a lot of it is super consonant because yeah, these weapons actually do slot into a lot of the same principles and kind of work with the way special forces will operate. So yeah. A little bit less clear to me like how exactly you incorporate some things like I feel like increasingly in the future warfare will be about like digital attacks and things like that, and space. So I'm very curious to see how ninjutsu might evolve to work in like zero gravity environments or on the surface of Mars where gravity is like 0.6 Gs. one of my good ninja friends worked for 2 decades as a security penetration tester, so she was literally like trying to infiltrate office buildings, and I thought that was like so cool.
It's around 1:35.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's call it here. If anyone is interested in training, come talk to me and I'll get your phone number. Our dojo is in Bed-Stuy, and it's a good time.